China bull versus China bears.
Indeed.
George Soros now. I mean, not now,
he's been there all along.
But he's getting a lot of traction.
Well, he does. I mean, the thing is, George Soros made his money breaking a currency peg, which was the sterling.
Yeah.
Then he broke the Malaysian and the Indonesian Thai baht back in the... And there's an old expression from the Soviet Union, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And, you know, you're looking at a currency peg in China thinking, this is going to break. But the important thing, the really important thing about China is that it's not an emerging market that's borrowed money from abroad. So all this debt to GDP stuff is very relevant if you've borrowed in dollars, but China is internally funded, so therefore it's a different economic environment.
That's absolutely right, and that's why these comparisons between the US pre-2008 and China seem kind of weird, because, I mean, they're entirely different economies, entirely different structures in which the debt is weighed out, because, I mean, the US has money owed to them by everybody. They owe money to everybody, effectively, whereas China's quite the reverse.
Yeah, exactly. The important thing about China, as we say repeatedly on here, is China is building a financial system in real time. And if we keep imposing a Western view on it, we keep thinking, oh, that's scary, or that's bad, or that's good. And one of the things I've said on here before, but I keep saying is, $3 trillion of local government debt we're supposed to be scared about, but actually that's $3 trillion of high-yield-paying assets that you can own. In a world where actually most government debt is negative. So if you're trying to build a pension system and a long-term investment system, you need assets that have cash flow behind them that are actually yielding. Yes, there will always be some bad debt somewhere, but what we have to realise is that most of China is still funded by a traditional bank model, and it's moving to a capital markets model, the markets we all work in. So we should be analysing, in my view, through that prism rather than saying, oh, it's scary, here's a ratio, let's panic.
But is it the great unknown, what we don't know, that perhaps is more concerning about China, going from the veracity of their data?
Like Rumsfeld there for a second.
Fitch saying, you know, all these twists and turns in policy, we just don't know. Is it that uncertainty that's going to make it difficult for the market?
It does, but I mean, to be fair, again, I'm pragmatic about China. I'm not wildly bullish or wildly bearish, and I'm not sort of pro or anti. I'm just saying, let's look at what they tell us what they're doing. So, you know, there's a 5-year plan. We know what their 5-year plan is. It's about the urbanisation, and it's about the reform of the previous state-owned enterprises. It's about shifting to higher value-added manufacturing, etc., etc. It's a 5-year plan. Where in the West have we got a 5-year plan? We don't have any visibility on... It almost seems to be made up overnight, depending on what somebody said on Twitter. Suddenly we get a new policy comes out. So, actually, there's always uncertainty. And ironically, I would say in China we've got a little more certainty than we have anywhere else in terms of government policy.
And you were pleasant. I was reading your notes. You were pleasantly surprised by this trip to Shenzhen. BYD, is that an investment recommendation? Is just an example of this new economy that you're...
Well, what was interesting, I mean, I'm a huge electric car bull, as you may recall, and we went to see Denza. Now, Denza is BYD's joint venture with Daimler. Now, they've got a car that looks pretty much like the old B-Class Mercedes with a battery bolted on underneath, and the electric
battery,
and the electric motors under the bonnet. So it looks very, very conventional. And while everybody's been talking about the new Tesla Model 3 coming in 2 years' time, this thing is being made in China right now. And what I find very interesting is that the Chinese government clearly are trying to reduce pollution. There's a major issue for them. Not CO2, but NOx and SOx and particulates. And they're really pushing for electric buses, they're really pushing for these electric vehicles. And I think we're finding that the manufacturing effort in China that's made everything else really cheap and quick and in large scale is moving towards these things.
Mark,
I think we need to look at that.
I haven't got much time, but what I found interesting was this visit to Shenzhen with these Western investors, how their preconceptions as they went in there, and how those preconceptions perhaps changed. Tell us about that.
Well, that was right. And we had some visitors over from Europe, and we took them out to Shenzhen, and the George Soros view that it's all complicated and it's all falling apart and it's all terrible. But actually, when you go there, you see Shenzhen obviously is trying to make itself the new tech area of China. You know, parts of China are going very fast, parts of China are going very slowly. And we introduced them to the house builders, you know, the biggest house builders in the world, and realising actually the affordability you have. So there's lots of positive stories about these Chinese consumers and what they're doing.
But they hadn't thought of it before.
Well, they hadn't been introduced to it. And the closer you get, the more complicated it gets about China. So therefore, there's a bear story and there's a bull story. And in the middle, it's all quite messy, but it's very interesting.